Merits of the administration's missile defense plans, we turn to Senator Joseph Biden of Delaware, the senior Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and Richard Perle, former Assistant Secretary of Defense in the Reagan administration and a defense advisor to the Bush campaign. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Richard Perle, is the administration right to make this such a high priority? Why does the U.S. need this now?
First of all, it was an important part of the president's campaign. He didn't make many promises, but the ones he did make, he means to keep, and I think that's the way it ought to be. If we don't get started, it's going to take some time, no matter when we get going. The program that the outgoing administration had been looking at is worse than inadequate. It would have been foolish to build it. So we have to start over again, in a sense, building on technology that's been developed. But we have to start somewhere, and the sooner the better.
But what is the threat? Why is it necessary at all?
Well, we know that there are a number of countries attempting to acquire ballistic missiles. Some of them already have weapons of mass destruction in the form of chemical and biological agents and are working on nuclear agents. And they could break through in this area at any moment. We simply don't know when. If we assume that the only way they can acquire a missile is through their own independent efforts, it could be a few years. But if it comes through trade, if it comes through a transfer of technology, it could happen very suddenly.
How do you see the threat? Is this the way to meet it?
Well, first of all, I don't know, nor do I think Mr. Perle knows exactly what the president's going to propose. We agree on one thing. The last system shouldn't have been built. It didn't do the job, and I think it was unnecessary for the alleged threat. One of the things I think this relates to is priorities. I think Richard is correct that there could be a breakout in terms of the purchase of this technology, the purchase of a weapon, the purchase of a missile. And that's why...
Excuse me for interrupting, but are you both talking about countries like North Korea, like Iran, like Iraq?
Well, I am, and but I'm not sure what the president is talking about. And I'm not being facetious. The president says several things. He says we have to worry about rogue nations. He says we have to worry about an accidental launch, which means from China or from Russia or anywhere else. The technology, the capacity, the capability of those systems to deal with each of those are very, very different. One is much broader than the other. And I think we have to look at what are the priorities. I'm for the continuation of expending billions of dollars on research and seeing what is the best proposal, because I can envision a circumstance where offense and defensive capability combined would enhance our security. But it seems to me that we should be focusing more on, for example, the recommendations of Senator Baker and others saying that the greatest imminent threat we have is the destabilization of nuclear weapons and Russian scientists for sale. They say it's going to cost $30 billion to deal with that problem. So a lot of this has to do with priorities. I'm holding my powder dry until I see what the president proposes. I can see a circumstance where we could negotiate a circumstance where we had a continuation of deterrence, fewer strategic weapons, and a defensive capability. But one thing we agree on, we shouldn't be pouring cement in Alaska right now.
How big an area, whom should this system protect?
Well, it should, of course, protect the United States, but I believe it should also protect our friends and allies, some of whom are potentially more vulnerable and exposed than we are. It's very important to remember one thing. We have no defense today against ballistic missiles, none whatsoever, not even against a single missile. A single accidentally launched missile, a single missile that Saddam Hussein might acquire would put him in the position of being able to inflict untold damage on the United States. Now, if we want to discourage Saddam Hussein from acquiring that missile and that warhead in the first place, we should raise the barrier. We should create a circumstance in which a single missile isn't going to do him any good because we'll intercept it, or 2 or 5 or 10 or 50. So a limited defense, not a huge ambitious project, one that we can afford, is the best way to halt the proliferation of these weapons by discouraging people from believing that they can intimidate the United States.
Theoretically correct, as long as the end product is that we don't have the Russians stop dismantling their MIRV weapons, have
their multiple warhead
weapons, and have China go from 18 to 200 or 600 or 800 ICBMs. So it is possible to do that. The greatest threat, by the way, that we have is a dirty bomb being put in the bottom of a tramp steamer coming up the middle of, I mean, look, we smuggle tons of cocaine into this country. We can't stop. It wouldn't be hard to do the other. And we're not spending, they aren't mutually exclusive. We should do both. But we're spending precious little of our money and our effort to deal with that problem relative, and that is scaled as a much higher threat than an ICBM striking us with a return address on it.
Would you agree that's a higher threat? The president said today, in fact, that the other threat comes in on a, I think he said steamer trunk or in a suitcase.
I think we have to be concerned with both. With respect to the clandestine infiltration of a weapon, about the only thing you can do is improve your intelligence collection, because if we know about it, we can stop it, and if we don't know about it, we probably can't.
Now, what about the other point Senator Biden just raised, which is the possible reaction of Russia and China? How do you think they're likely to react? Could it ultimately be more destabilizing?
I don't think so, and what I want to say to Senator Biden is that the Cold War is truly over. And there's no reason why the Russians need to regard a modest American defense against the likes of Saddam Hussein as a threat to Russia. Russia is no longer an enemy of the United States. And because it's no longer an enemy, the kinds of calculations we made during the Cold War, where we looked very carefully to make sure that offense and defense were balanced, calculations that were really enshrined in the ABM Treaty of 1972, those are really no longer relevant, either for us or for them. And as long as we continue to talk about Russian responses in Cold War terms, unwittingly, we're really perpetuating the psychology of the Cold War.
I really don't disagree with the basic premise, but I suspect that Secretary Perle would agree that there's a very different calculus for the Chinese with 18 ICBMs now.
You mean because this system,
theoretically, let me put it this way, the Chinese already believe we can do about anything we want to do. And so for us to sit and say, by the way, this system that can intercept 2, 5, 7, 12, 15 missiles from North Korea in the future, Iran or Iraq, they're going to sit there and say, it seems to me, any rational planner, well, wait a minute, I'm not so sure about us. And so again, this is all possible. But I hope there is there's almost a religious mantra that goes on, not with Secretary Perle, but in my outfit, the United States Senate. And that is, anything you can do now to kill dead and forever and put a wooden stake through the heart of the ABM Treaty, you should do it. There's others on the other side who say, at all costs, maintain the ABM Treaty. This is something that could, should, and must be pursued, negotiated, and discussed with our allies as well as our not our enemies, but our potential adversaries. And I don't know why we can't do it all.
How do you think the administration should deal with Russia's concerns and with the ABM Treaty? Because, I mean, they haven't bought the argument you made. The Clinton administration made the same argument to them last year, and they didn't buy it. That this wasn't aimed at them.
Well, what the Clinton administration was doing was basically living within the terms of the ABM Treaty with a little modification. Look, the treaty was concluded 30 years ago. It was intended to prevent the building of a missile defense. It no longer, in my view, serves our interest. The other party, the Soviet Union, no longer exists. And Russia is not an enemy of the United States. So a treaty meant to regulate a deadly quarrel in which we were both poised at the ready with thousands of nuclear weapons just isn't appropriate for a situation where the concern is not Russian nuclear weapons, but Saddam Hussein's nuclear weapon or 2 or 3. It's another world. And with respect to the Chinese, the Cold War is over with respect to Russia. Happily, it hasn't begun with respect to China, and let's hope it doesn't.
That's right. But I think we can affect whether or not it begins with China. And look, the rule of unintended consequences plays a significant role in our past history in foreign and defense policy. And again, I don't question the motivation of President Bush. And again, I will wait to see what it is he is proposing. But I just do not think there should be any unilateral action taken. The urgency is not there. at this moment. It is possible. Somebody could transfer this technology, but there is not an immediate need. We can move forward now. We spent, what, $6 billion last year on research in this area, roughly. It's not like we're standing still. And I'm glad to see that this administration is taking what appears to be a very studied, conscientious and serious look at this. I don't know how that can be done in 2 or 3 weeks, and I don't expect that to be the case. But there's two forces here. There's a congressional force that's moving along here. I am much more satisfied with the way in which this administration seems to be approaching the issue. They say they need cohesion, they want a NATO alliance, they want us to be together, they want to... You have to be able to do...
Are you in agreement on this sort of urgency question or time frame question, or do you think the administration needs to move quickly?
I don't think we should run for the exit, but we should walk with deliberate speed. You know, there's one last issue that I think really deserves at least mention. If we depend on the military means we have now, that is the threat to retaliate, and we don't have a defense in the future, it raises a profound moral issue. Henry Kissinger has raised this, and he was the architect of the ABM Treaty. Do we really want to kill millions of Iraqis who happen to live in Baghdad if Saddam does something terrible to us? That's the only recourse we have now to discourage an attack on the United States. It's far better to have a defense that doesn't require us to kill civilians.
All right, gentlemen, thank you both.
Thank you. Appreciate it.